Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. Another playoff preview series video for the first round. My name is Jim Parsons. I'm here with the HockeyRaiders.com. We're going to be talking about the Vegas Golden Knights and the Winnipeg Jets. In this video, I've got a couple writers from the Hockey Raiders with us today. They're experts on these two teams, so they're going to be covering the Jets and Vegas, respectively. We've got Eric Cruikshank and Brian Finlayson. Eric, how are you today?
I'm great. It's the best time of the year for hockey fans. Playoff season is about to get underway, so I'm super excited.
Yeah, no, it's going to be really good. This is the last of the first round series videos that we're covering. So I'll say it right now. We're saving the best for last. It's going to be awesome. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing great. As Eric said, it's like Christmas right now. So, just waiting for those games to get going on, I guess tomorrow. Yeah. So, no, it's a lot of fun sort of trying to think about everything that's about to happen over the next few weeks.
I didn't look at the schedule. Are you guys a Monday start or a Tuesday start?
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Right on. Okay, cool. Well, let's very briefly run through what it's looked like with these two teams against each other in the regular season, and then we'll send it over to you both to talk a little bit more specifically about the team, how they did this year, how they looked against each other, things like that. So Vegas finishes the season with 111 points. The Jets 95 in their series against each other. It was 3-0-0 for Vegas, so they managed to get points out of all of those games. There was an overtime win there, so the Winnipeg did scrape a point out of the series. In terms of the top scorers for each team, it was kind of Jack Eichel running the show from a Vegas perspective. They've got Eric Stevenson, Marchessault following it up, but not really a bunch of high-end scoring when it comes to Vegas. They were just a really, really solid team all year. And I had mentioned to you guys coming off the hop here, I was a little bit surprised by that. I thought that maybe Vegas would take a step backwards a little bit, but they remained solid, remained in the lead for most of the year, if not all of it. On the Winnipeg side, Kyle Connor finishes with 80 points. Josh Morrissey, 76. He has a fantastic season from the blue line for Winnipeg. Mark Scheifele was 68. Pierre-Luc Dubois was 63. So let's start with Brian. What did you see from your team this season? Maybe with how they played against their opponent here, or anybody in general. Like, what did you get out of their season and heading into this series against Vegas?
Yeah, it's been an interesting year because it's been very up and down where essentially from the jump, they were among the top teams in the West. They were challenging for first even at the All-Star break. Then when they came back, it was almost as if they had lost something and had about a month or so there where they looked lost. None of the line combinations were working. And with that, it seemed like there was questions about the motivation, which suddenly seemed very reminiscent of previous years where things were a little bit iffy. But there was a game in San Jose, I think it was 8 or 9 games remaining in the season where they got shut out by the Sharks. And then there was a very notable move where Mark Scheifele was moved to wing. Rick Bowness changed all of the lines. And then as soon as that happened, it was like the team snapped back into focus. They went 5-2 to finish off the year. And ended up finishing obviously they fought off Calgary, they fought off Nashville. But considering they started and were challenging for first place at the All-Star break, the fact that they managed to just fight off teams to get in was a little bit shocking. That said, it felt like a lot of shoulda, coulda, woulda with them because they have the same amount of wins as Tampa, Seattle, Minnesota, and the difference there is if they lost, it was in regulation. They only had 3 extra points there. They have the most regulation losses out of any team in the playoffs this year. So in reality, if those close games at all, like if they manage to actually scrape out a point, we could be talking about a division spot for the Jets. But they managed to get the wins in regulation. They managed to lose in regulation, but they finished on a high note, which I'm curious to see how that translates over.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what you think about the Jets coming into this series, especially with all that has gone on with that franchise. Rick Bowness comes in as head coach. There's some times during the season where he sort of calls out people, and then he's pretty vocal about, the effort level of some of the players. There was a lot of drama last year in Winnipeg and talk of Mark Scheifele and other things, and really this circle around Pierre-Luc Dubois and what he's going to be doing. How do you think that's going to affect them? Does it affect them? Like, will it be a factor here in this series?
I mean, I think it's probably going to be on the minds of everyone because I think there's a level of, I think a lot of these guys know what's at stake here, and that in the next couple years this team's going to look drastically different. I wonder around the deadline, because that's when they really started noticeably struggling, if some of that creeped in, because you see all the chatter about, oh, are they going to go all in because the core is expiring, or they're gonna lose Dubois in the off season. And I wonder if that kind of creeped in a little bit there. But whatever was said and done at that time of those, line shuffling by Bonus there, something worked. And the last week, it was as if everything had gone back. They were, their underlying numbers were fantastic. I mean, Connor Hellebuck, he was also in that, he was not excluded from that downstretch. He didn't look like his regular sort of Vezina self. But in the last 13 games or so of the season, to sort of drag the team to the playoffs, he was outstanding. He had a sub 2 goals against, up above a 930 save percentage. Like, it was, that team decided at some point that maybe we need to just refocus a little bit. And I think Bonus did a lot of that, and they're coming in now and they look like the team that was challenging for first. And I think that's going to be massive for them going into game 1, especially on the road.
Yeah, that'll be good if they've got that figured out, if they've got some of that drama behind them and it is not going to affect them in the series. That's going to be really important for them. Eric, let's move over to you. Let's talk a little bit about Vegas. Here's a team that talk about some drama every once in a while. It's good, it's bad. There's positives, there's some injuries, there's things going on in Vegas all the time. This is a team that everybody likes to talk about because there's always something happening. The latest is what's going on with Mark Stone. Is he back? Is he not back? All that stuff. So tell me a little bit about Vegas, what you thought of their season, how they played, specifically, but both against the Jets and then another team. What did you see from Vegas coming into this series?
Well, I mean, just looking at how they played against the Jets first, I think that the biggest difference between this season, their performance against the Jets, and last season was their defense. They outscored the team this season 16-7, whereas last year they lost the scoring 13-8. So they allowed like half as many goals on similar shot totals, but it's really just like how they've been able to limit high danger chances. And I think that has a lot to do with Bruce Cassidy and how he's come in and been able to mold this group into a very opportunistic offensive group. They're not really going to lead a lot of the time in the offensive zone, but they're just going to find their moments and be opportunistic about it. Just in terms of how they played throughout the season, it was a bit of an up and down year for them as well. One of the things that was the biggest storyline was their goaltending, with Robin Lehner obviously being out for the entire year, but it didn't really end up being a problem for them. They got great performances at the beginning of the year from Logan Thompson, the rookie goaltender. And then when he went down, it was Aiden Hill, who they acquired from San Jose last season. Then it was Jonathan Quick. Then it was Yuri Patera. And now Laurent Brossoit, who's emerged as the starting goaltender for game 1 here. Just a bit of a roller coaster, but they started off the season hot, 13-2-0. They were right there with the Boston Bruins at the beginning of the year, but things started to tail off as pretty much every star that you can name on the team started to get injured. Jack Eichel, Marchessault, Pietrangelo. Obviously, the absence of Stone was huge, but they pretty much turned it around. They looked like a completely new team after the All-Star break. They went 22-4-5 and are one of the hottest teams coming into the postseason. Took home their 3rd division title in just 6 years of being in the NHL. So this team just knows how to win. And I feel like a lot of the time it's your stars that get you in the postseason, but it's the depth that dictates a lot of how your success is. And I think you could say for the Golden Knights the whole year, it's been their depth that's got them there. And it's probably what's going to put them through if they win the round.
Those are good points. We're going to talk about, I think, a few of those things. One, the goaltending is going to be a storyline between these two teams for sure. When you've got, a Vezina caliber goalie in one team, and then you've got 5 people playing net in the other. That's certainly a storyline that we're going to be watching. You're not the first person to say the depth gets you through the playoffs, and so we'll talk a little bit about that. Brian, I'm going to move over to you first, though, when we're talking about players to watch here. When it comes to the Jets, is it the stars of this team that you're kind of keeping an eye on? Is it the depth of this team? Is it Hellebuck? Who are the players that we should probably be watching if Winnipeg stands a chance here?
Well, I mean, I'll stick with the goaltending thread to start here, where the team, for the most part, over the past several seasons, has lived and died with Connor Hellebuck. So essentially, if you're getting him at his best, which he's looked like for the large part of the season, he has the chance to steal you games. There was the earlier in the season, to sort of jump back to the season series between the two teams. There was that overtime loss for the Jets in Vegas where Hellebuck single-handedly dragged the Jets to a point. The Jets had no business being in that game. They were outshot by over 20 shots. I think Vegas had close to 50, and it was unreal to see what he was doing. They ended up losing that one, but without him, it probably is over very, very early in that game with how much they were pressing him. So it starts a net for them. But in terms of their stars, their early success was because their stars were succeeding. Their later success was because everyone was contributing. So you have, people like up front, obviously the stars. You got Scheifele, who, if they can find a way to get him back to his 2017-18 playoff self, where he had 20 points in 17 games, that'd be fantastic. But there's a realism factor where you need to start relying on other guys throughout the lineup. So I'm going to focus mainly on the third line, where recently they put, deadline acquisition, Niederreiter with Adam Lowry and Mason Appleton. Niederreiter and Lowry especially have found a form of chemistry because they're both they're not going to be finesse players for you, but what they're going to do is they're going to go exactly where you need them to. They're going to, crash the net. They're going to put the puck where it needs to be in order to create chances. And with Niederreiter on that line now, you have someone who can finish chances. Add the fact that Niederreiter has 82 games of playoff experience, which is by far the most among all of the Jets players. You're going to get that experience where he knows a level of that intensity that maybe some of the guys don't. But then you also have Lowry, who has asserted himself as the heartbeat of this team. Recently, the Jets finished off, there was a game in Minnesota where it was just absolute chaos, fights left and right, a lot of questionable hits. There was a suspension to Ryan Hartman for a hit on Ehlers. And then eventually it all culminated in an Adam Lowry, Ryan Reeves fight, in which I don't recall anytime recently where I saw the Jets bench that fired up. As soon as Lowry was coming off the ice, they were all just absolutely screaming. The guys were waiting in the tunnel because it was near the end of the game. It was as if it was just another level of respect for him. And I mean, he's already an assistant captain. It wouldn't shock me if he's, going to be part of this leadership group for a while. But having someone like him, actually assert himself now as a bit of an offensive threat with Nino, it's something that's quite interesting. And then it's less, I'm not going to touch on these as much, but a player that I'm really curious about is Cole Perfetti, who is slated to come back if possible. He's been out with a shoulder injury for quite a while in this series, and I'm curious with how good the team has been clicking along where they would put him. So without going too much into that, because it's a lot of ifs, because we don't even know if he's going to come back, I'd be curious to see that if there's a healthy Cole Perfetti, where he fits into the Jets lineup, because he's a very smart player, and I'd be curious to see what he could add to an already, chemistry-filled lineup.
Yeah, I was going to ask you actually about the status of Cole Perfetti and Nikolai Ehlers when it comes to those two players. I saw the Adam Lowry footage, by the way, and them yelling in the tunnel. I thought that was awesome. When it comes to Cole Perfetti, do we have any kind of inclination as to whether or not he's going to be playing? And what's the status of Ehlers after taking that hit? Do we know if he's coming back?
Yeah, so Perfetti has been skating in a non-contact recently. There was a bunch of recent talk about his timeline and everything, and a few weeks ago it was, oh, he won't be ready, it's still going to be 2-3 weeks, and then he started skating and it was as if things had been moved up a little bit. So there is a potential for him to be cleared in this series if I think it goes longer than 5. So if you're looking games 6 or 7 possibly, but I'd say more realistically, if the Jets manage to move through, the second round would be more likely. In terms of Ehlers, he was very candid in speaking about his status yesterday after practice. He didn't practice, but he was talking about how he doesn't have any concerns personally. Didn't hear much from the coaching staff in terms of his status. It was still sort of just day to day. They're taking it easy, making sure that he's healthy. But no, with the way he was talking, it sounds like he's raring to go for game 1. So I'm curious to see what the coaching staff sort of confirms. I would say probably Tuesday morning in morning skate, because I'm assuming he'll be back into practice tomorrow, considering he missed yesterday. But I from how he's talking about it, I'd be shocked if he doesn't find his way into that lineup.
Yeah, it's tough when you talk about NHL players who don't want to play in the playoffs. Pretty much everybody wants to make it, even if they're not 100% healthy. And when it comes to coaches, you're probably not going to get much of a tipped hat from Bonus prior to the game and whether or not he's going to be in the lineup or not, because why would you tell Vegas, right?
Exactly.
Eric, let's move over to you. Let's talk a little bit about some of the players that you're watching from a Vegas perspective. Is it Eichel and his first playoff series for the Golden Knights? Is it some of their depth? Is it the goaltending that you mentioned earlier? What is kind of the key here? Who are the players that are going to be the most prominent in this series?
So I think just as an overarching narrative, it's hard to ignore Jack Eichel being his first postseason appearance. He's got 4 more years on his $80 million contract, and they have no move clauses on all of those years. Obviously, this is just his first full season. And it was a good one, not the MVP caliber level Jack Eichel that he is capable of being, but it was a good season for him. They invested a lot into him, and he'll have to be effective in order for them to be successful on offense. And he was pretty good against Winnipeg this season. He had, I think 3 goals, 1 assist in all those 3 games. And he was hot towards the end of the year as well. He had 23 points in his last 20 games. So he is a guy that is definitely capable of dictating the outcome of this series with his skill. But I just am a little worrisome about the fact that it is his first postseason appearance, and it's a completely different game that I think he'll have to be coming accustomed to very quickly. Another player that I'm looking at is Riley Smith. He's been one of the most consistent players for the Golden Knights all year, despite going through a whole bunch of injuries on the team. He's one of the best playoff performers as well. I think he's 3rd all time in their playoff scoring. And just like Eichel, he was hot towards the end of the year, 24 points in his last 27 games. So definitely 2 guys I'm excited to watch. And we were talking about injuries earlier. Mark Stone, definitely one of the biggest question marks that could also be a big deciding factor in this series. He is participating in full practice, but he's skating on the 3rd line with Chandler, Stevenson, and Michael Amadio. So it's not really, I think, where he's going to end up playing for the entire series, especially if Winnipeg ends up winning game 1, maybe game 2 as well. Things will probably be shifted around, but it's just a testament to their depth. I think if he were to start out on the 3rd line, just how dangerous their bottom 6 can end up being.
I was going to ask you if you have any idea of whether or not he's going to be in for game 1, and I'll put you out there and put the pressure on you. What do you think of that? Because if he is ready for game 1, and there's all this talk, obviously, of how LTIR works and who comes back for the playoffs and all that stuff, you cover the team, so maybe you don't want to answer this question, but do you believe that is one of those things where it's like, maybe that's a little too convenient?
I would say it is, but I don't know what it's like going through 2 back surgeries in 2 seasons, right? So that recovery is insane. For him to be able to even be in the conversation to come back, I think is amazing, but also convenient. So I think you can definitely have a conversation about both of those things. I'm just excited if he comes back.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting because it's timing wise. Vegas went out and spent some of that money from his contract, so they improved their team. He's coming back. So, I mean, it's within the rules. It hasn't changed at all. So I guess you can do it. And Vegas, we know, is a team that likes to play on the edge. Sometimes they like to walk over that line a little bit. But if it helps them, especially after missing the playoffs last year, right? This is a team that has a lot to bounce back from, improve, and that sort of thing. Brian, let's jump over to the keys to the series here when it comes to the Jets. What are they going to need to do? Because they're the underdogs in this series. They do have the firepower to run and gun with the Vegas Golden Knights. Can they do that? Is this something that they want to avoid? What do you believe is the key to the Jets being victorious here?
Well, I think the key is being opportunistic. Obviously, we know that going into the playoffs, Laurent Brossoit has been absolutely lights out. In the 11 games that he's played, he's been fantastic. That said, he is yet to show, yet to show in a larger sample size that he can keep this up necessarily, especially in a long series. So if you're the Jets and you can find a way to get to Brossoit, then suddenly you're looking at Jonathan Quick potentially, because there's always the option there because he's won 2 cups. He's been there. So we know that teams respect pedigree a lot. And I'm curious if that manages, to actually go their way. That opportunity to have a couple of guys who aren't necessarily known as, I mean, Quick used to be, but no longer known as these top goalies. If you can find a way to rattle them a little bit and get to them, then suddenly this series has an entirely different complexion. And I think in terms of opportunity as well, you have to look at things like special teams. The Jets have a top 10 penalty kill. So immediately that's going to help them, especially when you've got your best penalty killer, Connor Hellebuck, back there. If they can manage to keep I mean, obviously it's going to change with Mark Stone, but if you keep the Vegas power play a little bit quieter and you leave things in terms of their scoring at 5-on-5, that helps them a lot. Vegas's penalty kill is also, in the bottom half of the league. I think it's around, 18th, 19th in the league. Jets power play isn't all that great. It hasn't been for a while, but in that little stretch at the end of the season, they were trying different things that actually got them a few goals. If they can manage to even get a couple of power play goals, just on the off chance that they can manage to actually generate like they were at the end of the year, then suddenly, if you have the special teams advantage and you can hold it at 5-on-5, I don't think it's unreasonable to call this upset alert, because it's something that you can swing a game on entirely, and special teams can change the entire makeup of an entire series. So it's I think that's the key, is opportunity, and when the opportunity knocks, you take it.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that the power play is not better, to be honest with you. When you've got guys like Josh Morrissey back there and you got the firepower that you have offensively, that they haven't scored more is a little bit surprising to me. Eric, what about you? Is there kind of a key here for the Vegas Golden Knights, something that they need to be doing, something they need to stick to, a plan going in when they're facing a team like the Jets that's going to get them through the series?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, I mentioned it earlier, their commitment to defense has to be imperative. Like I said, Bruce Cassidy, since he's come in, he's really encouraged the team to play from their own end and out. They rarely give up odd man rushes. They force teams to dump the puck in a lot, and I think they do a great job of covering passing lanes in the middle of their own zone. That's when they're at their best. Whenever they stray away from that and it's not really going their way, things can turn pretty quickly. So if they stay committed in their own zone, blocking the shooting lanes, you look at Alec Martinez, he's first in the league in block shots. Braden McNabb is second, and I think Pietrangelo is seventh. So these guys are playoff players. They're not afraid to get in front of the puck. So just staying composed in your own zone and not giving up too much ground there, I think that's going to be the biggest key for them.
I agree with you, because especially if you're not 100% sure what your goaltending is going to look like, stopping shots from getting through to those goaltenders is going to be really, really important. Let's switch gears just a little bit and talk about things that you might be worried about. Brian, we'll start with you. Is there any concern? You may have mentioned something already in some of the previous conversations, or something new here that you're sort of worried about when it comes to the Jets, where you might say, man, if this happens, the Jets are kind of in trouble here. Is there a concern for you or worry when it comes to this team?
Well, I mean, starting off with what I just talked about, is if the power play doesn't click, then having to make up all of your offense at 5-on-5 is a very daunting task. But I think that the biggest concern that I have is they've had a tendency to be very top heavy, even with the lines, where if one or two guys goes quiet, the rest of the team can't make it up. And that's the case for a lot of teams, but the Jets, it seems like over that stretch where they just couldn't buy a goal, it was as if the offense was coming from guys you would never consider, but it was also the puck wasn't going in. So you'd see these things happening and you go, that should be a goal, and it wouldn't go in. So if any of their top guys get snuffed out by Vegas, I would be concerned that the series ends quicker than the Jets would hope and not in their favor. And I think largely the status of Nikolai Ehlers determines a lot of this, because he is one of the most dynamic offensive players in the entire league. And when he's on the ice, it changes a lot. When he's on the power play, when he's he's so quick to get in and out of the zone that his impact on the transition game is just so important for what the Jets actually want to do, that if he's not in the lineup, I'd be concerned that they can't make up that talent difference regardless of who they put in. So I that's where I worry a little bit, is just their scoring depth. It could be better, and it has been better as of late. I just worry that especially with what Eric said with the defensive structure, if they really tighten up, because man, Vegas is well coached. And that's another thing that kind of worries me a little bit, is how good Bruce Cassidy is at game planning. I would be concerned that if someone gets shut down, then the series suddenly flips very heavily towards Vegas.
I was going to ask you about Ehlers, and I've heard this narrative, and you may correct me if I'm wrong here, that he doesn't play as often as maybe he should, or some of the other big names. I don't know if he doesn't play a lot in the series, it'll be injury related or what have you, but is that true at all, that it's a surprise in Winnipeg sometimes at the lack of minutes that he gets?
Yeah, it's switched up a little bit recently with the whole line juggling thing, but even still, he's not getting as much as I think he should. I think he should be given, 17, 18, 19 minutes a night, but there was a stretch there where he was averaging between 14 and 15, and some of the other guys that playing on your third line are right up with there as well, and the minute shares were all over the place, where you'd see high leverage minutes being played by guys like Kevin Stenlund and Saku Maenalainen instead of having Nikolai Ehlers out there to try and get a goal. Like it has, as I said, shifted a little bit recently, but in that point when it seemed like the Jets really needed to kick it into high gear, Rick Bowness just didn't seem to trust Ehlers to come back in and, put the puck in the net. And a lot of that was him saying that he needs to work on his defensive game. But that being said, a lot of the other guys that he was putting out there anyways also need to work on it. So guys like Scheifele, Connor, Wheeler, their defensive metrics are not the best either. So it's I think finally he's producing at the level that everyone knows he can produce at. The unfortunate thing is he's a question mark coming into the series with his injuries. And if he is healthy though, I think that's absolute, an advantage for the Jets, because he is so good, and he's an absolute game changer when he gets going, and he can carry a whole line, because he's on a line right now with Nemesnikov and Ehlers and Wheeler, and it's those two thrive off of what he can do, and they get to the open space because he's drawing 2-3 guys onto him. So I think having him playing the key minutes is going to be key for the Jets.
The reason I asked that question was because you had mentioned that if the top guys aren't going and the depth doesn't follow, would Bowness have the whatever to put Ehlers in there as a top guy to maybe spark the team, right? So if Ehlers is a guy that you say is as dynamic as he is, and he can get that goal or get the team sparked and get them started, will he get the opportunity to do that if Bowness isn't playing him as often as maybe he should? Eric, what about you? Is there something that you're sort of worried about here with Vegas? I mean, we've talked about the goaltending carousel, but Brossoit has been really good. Is there something in Vegas that you would be like, man, if this happens for this team, the Jets have a really good shot at upsetting them here?
Yeah, I'm not as worried about the goaltending as I think I should be. It's been like a winning by committee effort all year, and I think with goaltending just being so much like based on momentum, I think we're confident with Brossoit as the starting guy. In terms of like the biggest weakness, we touched on it earlier. When you look at the special teams, the only real unit that stands out is the Jets' penalty kill. They're fourth in the NHL in that category. And I think over the past couple of weeks, it's been a case of your goaltender is your best penalty killer. And that they've been able to win games like that. So it's not necessarily a knock on their style of play. The Golden Knights are 18th in the NHL on the power play, but they're 28th since the All-Star break, which is right behind the Anaheim Ducks, who are in the business of losing hockey games. So it's a little concerning there heading into the playoffs. But I think, once again, Mark Stone, if he gets into the lineup, it just changes their whole dynamic there. They're really stagnant on the power play. There's not a lot of movement to make the defense kind of shift around and find gaps to get to shooting lanes. But I think if you add Stone, who's a threat as a passer and a shooter, it just changes the whole dynamic of it.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting because we talk about teams in the power plays and how many opportunities they get during the playoffs, but they have, I think, gone up in the recent seasons in terms of how many get called. I know I cover the Oilers hoping that they get a ton of power plays, but if Vegas's power play isn't clicking and it's not really doing much, it's going to be interesting to see if that changes at all this series and how that goes. Again, this is if you folks have watched these videos before, you know that this next segment is one of my favorites because we get to talk about bold and not so bold predictions. And I'll just run through quickly in case you haven't what these are. So bold predictions are basically something where you're going to kind of put yourself out on the limb here. You're going to talk about something that maybe nobody else is watching that you're thinking could happen in this series. And then a not so bold prediction is something more obvious that we all know is probably going to happen, but we're going to point it out anyway, just because we expect to see it. Brian, let's start with you and the Jets. Do you have a bold prediction for this team and a not so bold prediction for the Jets?
Yeah, so bold. I think the Jets ride their high of their last, several games and their chemistry. I think they go into Vegas and take game one on the road in a very hostile building. I think they do that, suck the energy out, and I think they ride that to a series win. I truly think, obviously, the odds always prefer teams that win the first game, but I feel very good about their chances coming in with how hot they've been, and how they've been playing and how Hellebuck's been playing. So I think, boldly going out and saying game one, they're coming out, they're flying out there, and they're doing what they need to do to take the game. And then not so bold to stick with Hellebuck. I think that he's just going to keep it close regardless. I don't think that's at this point we've seen that that's not bold in the slightest. He's going to give you, an A+ effort regardless. He's going to make sure that you're getting a chance that if you put up a few goals, maybe you can actually, take a game and he'll make the saves he needs to make. He's one of those guys that recently, if you can only score 2 or 3, he's going to, actually claw out some wins. So I think that it's not overly, bold at all to say that he is going to be the one to really, determine how things go. And I think he can do that. I'm not concerned by that at all.
Well, as a fan who covers the Oilers, I know how painful it can be to face Connor Hellebuck in a series. He single-handedly destroyed Edmonton one year, so it's he can get hot and he can change the whole thing. Eric, what about you? Do you have a bold prediction for Vegas and not so bold prediction for the Golden Knights? What are the two that you've chosen?
Well, for bold, I went really bold after all this talk about how great Hellebuck is, and I think we're actually going to sweep the series. The Golden Knights will. I think the biggest thing that I'm looking at with the roster makeup is the depth, and I've talked about it already. But you look at a guy like William Carrier, 16 goals, 25 points, career highs in both. Michael Amadio, 16 goals, 27 points, career highs in both. Carrier has 7 game-winning goals. Phil Kessel, the ageless wonder, 14 goals. They just have so many ways to beat you, and all of these guys have, with all the injuries this year, have had the opportunity to take on a larger role and prove that they can perform. And I think the Jets will just have a hard time finding ways to match up with their bottom 6 without giving up ground on their top 2 lines, which are excellent when they're firing on all cylinders. But that's definitely the bold prediction. As for a not so bold one, I'll say that this series goes 7. I think when you look just at the trajectory of both of these two teams, they're on the up and they're just going to collide. And the Hellebuck, we've talked about him already, just how great he can be. I think he can easily push this to 7 as well.
Well, I'm very curious to see what your prediction is going to be because your bold has them sweeping and your not so bold has them going 7. So I'm really kind of curious to see where you're going to fall in the middle when it comes to the predictions. I'm going to get in on this one too. When it comes to bold, I think Jack Eichel has a 4-point night on one of these games. I think he gets 2-2. His first playoff series is going to be really interesting to watch. He's either going to show up in a major way or he's going to crumble under the pressure of having played in this league for so long and not having been there, that the weight of it is going to be a real factor for him. And then not so bold, I'm going to stick with Hellebuck too. I think at the very least, he steals you a game if doesn't get a shutout. So Winnipeg will not get swept just simply because he's that good. But that's my not so bold. Let's go into predicting, respective MVPs for the season. So Brian, you can pick somebody from the Jets. You can pick somebody from Vegas. don't really care. But the idea here is to pick somebody that you think is going to be a standout in this series. So whether Vegas wins it or Winnipeg wins it, typically the MVP comes from the winning team, but you can go any direction you want here. So do you have an MVP that you're kind of projecting for the series?
Well, I've talked about him a lot already today. It's hard to not say Connor Hellebuck. Like truly, like it is such an important thing for the team. And last year, he wasn't rewarded for his incredible play. He was keeping them close to the playoff line for most of the season. This year, he was finally given some offense to work with, and he was playing at the same level. His numbers are similar to his, Vezina Trophy winning season. So it's a matter of him just doing what he does every night, and I can see him doing that in a series. And I'd have him as my MVP.
No, that makes sense. That's the good odds there are picking Hellebuck as an MVP because he's kind of done it before and he's definitely capable of doing it again. Eric, what about you? Do you got an MVP here, either for Vegas, Winnipeg, whatever you want to go?
Well, I mean, yeah, Hellebuck, I think even if they end up losing this series, it's hard to imagine that he's going to just fall off a cliff, really. He's been their MVP, I think, for maybe the past few seasons, really. And it's hard to pick anyone else on either roster who's going to have a bigger impact than him.
I'm going to go, if he plays, I'm going to go with Mark Stone. I think in this series, if he gets in there, now we don't know, you talked about his 2 back surgeries, how healthy he actually is, but I can't imagine, I mean, he'll want to play, but that he's going to play a lot if he's really nursing something. So I think he's probably pretty good to go if he gets in there. And if he is getting in there, he's going to be a player we talk about. He's going to make a difference and be an impact, both offensively and defensively. He could change the series if he's, able to go and start game 1 or 2. So I'm going to pick Mark Stone as my MVP there. Let's do predictions for the series. Brian, where are you going with this one? Are you picking Winnipeg? Are you picking Vegas? We know that you believe that they can upset the Vegas Golden Knights here. So are you going with Winnipeg in the series? And then how many?
Yeah, so over the last few days, the more I think about it, the more I'm realizing that there's a legitimate shot here at an upset. That said, it's going to be a really close series. A lot of the public data models I've seen have it very close to an even split. But I'm going to go Jets in 7. It's going to go the distance, but I think the Jets are going to pull it out, probably on the back of some obscene performance from Hellebuck.
What about you, Eric? Who are you picking and in how many games?
I'm going to go with the Golden Knights in 6. I think we talked about the special teams earlier, but the Golden Knights don't really take or draw a lot of penalties. So I think a lot of the games will be played at 5-on-5, which I think benefits them. So yeah, Golden Knights in 6.
I'm going with Vegas too. I'm going to say Vegas in 7. Not having watched the team as closely as I probably should, but watching them in the standings with the Oilers chasing them and then at Vegas just continuing to win. I believe that they have this ability about them just to, no matter what goes on here, that they could win hockey games. And so if that's the case and it gets really close or it gets nasty or whatever kind of style is played here, that Vegas will somehow have a way of figuring out how to get a victory here and there. And it'll be enough to put them in the series. So I'm going to go with Vegas here. I think it's going to be 7, but I agree with both of you. I think it'll be close. I think Winnipeg's got the opportunity here to upset somebody, and it could be Vegas in the first round because having said that Vegas could win, I don't know how confident I am that they are as good as their record in 111 points have suggested. So we'll see. It could be a very interesting series. Thank you both for doing this. This was another really solid rundown of the first round preview series between Vegas and Winnipeg. Eric, let's put your Twitter handle or whatever you want out there for people if they want to follow you or read your stuff. How can they do it?
Yeah, so my Twitter is at CRUUK, and I'll be covering the Golden Knights throughout the playoffs at the Hockey Writers.
And Brian, what about you? How can people find your stuff?
You can find me on Twitter at YWG Brian. And then, I just post all my my Hockey Writer stuff there, all my personal analysis, podcast stuff and everything.
Awesome. Well, thank you to both of you. Obviously, one of these two teams is going to make it through the first round, and hopefully we'll get a chance to get one of you back here to talk about the second round preview, whatever and whoever it is they're facing. So for everybody else, please do comment on these videos. Put it in the comment section. Let us know who you think is going to win it, how many games, who you think the MVP is going to be. Put in there so we can have a nice conversation about it, and check out their work at thehockeywriters.com. There's a lot of really good stuff being pumped out here during the playoffs, and I'm excited to read both of your work. And join us for other videos in the first round, and stay with us throughout the playoffs as we're going to be covering every team, every round as we go through this. Talk to you guys later. Thanks, everybody.